5:30, and we're having our joint Economic Development Advisory Committee, EDAC, with City Council. Let me start out by saying, welcome EDAC. Thank you for everything that you do and working to improve, our community and help our transition. So we appreciate everything, all the volunteerism that you guys are performing with Shannon. So with that, you just want to go down, Shannon? You taking this, or how do you want?
I think let's start it off with just a round of introductions. I think everybody kind of knows each other, but for some of the newer members, if we
I
could
take
just
that for granted. Sorry.
Yeah, just state your name if you're with the organization, and then if you're on either the EDAC committee or council. So, Mayor, we'll start with you.
Well, Chris Nichols. I'm Mayor, City Council. So.
Luke Tucker, City Council.
Derek Durant, City Council and Liaison to EDAC.
I'm Mindy Elliott. I'm the Finance Director for the city.
Melanie Kilpatrick, Administrative Assistant for the city.
Shannon Scott. I'm the Economic Development Manager for the city.
Chris Jones, part of EDAC.
Mac McMurray, EDAC.
Peter Briggs, City Manager.
Heather Cannon, City Attorney.
Andrea Camp, City Council.
Ashley Dishman, EDAC and SEDC.
Amy Smith, EDAC.
Michelle Gottschall, City Council.
Randy Looper, City Council and Liaison to EDAC.
Tom Kleinschutz, Director of Moffett County Tourism. I do not represent Moffett County EDAC Commissioners, and I'm on the EDAC Committee.
Sasha Nelson, EDAC Committee and Economic Recovery Corps Fellow for Northwestern Colorado.
So I think what I want to do is just kind of start off to discuss how we got to this point and kind of the purpose of this meeting tonight. So the EDAC was officially reorganized in the spring of 2022. I believe before that we had probably 3 or 4 members that were part of the City Council. So just kind of going through some transitions with some changeover in council, we decided to reorganize the EDAC. Basically, we had an application process. We were looking for 7 members to serve on the EDAC. So we actually had exactly 7 applications back in the spring of 2022, which of course all of those came and were vetted through council, which were ultimately approved by the City Council. We do have 2 council liaisons, as Derek and Randy mentioned, so they sit on the EDAC committee on behalf of the City Council. So basically just kind of the process since the reorganization of the EDAC. So we had the bylaws that were adopted in the spring of 2022. And so I just wanted to read the purpose of the EDAC in relation to council and kind of set the stage for the meeting this evening. So the purpose of the EDAC bylaws read that the Craig City Council shall appoint an Economic Development Advisory Committee which shall act in an advisory capacity to the City Council and the manager of the department, including assisting in planning and implementing the 5 focus areas, goals, and priorities set forth in the Moffett County Vision 2025 Transition Plan. The advisory committee members should be comprised of local community members who represent large cross sections of the community who have passion, energy, and time to devote to this work. So as we all heard, the EDAC members certainly do represent cross sections of our community. So basically, again, just utilizing the Moffett County Vision 2025 Transition Plan as our guiding document. Obviously, that is set to expire next year. So we're kind of looking for, I think, some guidance from council to see what our next steps are. Obviously, we've done a great job in accomplishing a lot of those priorities. For instance, the transportation initiatives, we have put together a regional transportation authority in conjunction with Steamboat Springs and Moffett County. Obviously, this passenger rail is coming into town. We're accomplishing things through our housing initiatives like the 8th Street project and the potential 96-unit apartment complex. The urban renewal initiatives, including the establishment of both of the urban renewal authority areas, with projects like the Bad Alibi Distillery and the Village Inn. Marketing was also a big priority through the transition plan. We have created our new economic development website. We have hired Marketing Alliance to help us with social media campaigns, targeted marketing campaigns, etc. We are working through some great outdoor rec opportunities with the Yampa River Corridor projects. obviously upgrades to our parks like Woodbury Park, Lottie Simpson, and Alice Pleasant Park. Agriculture was also another big priority through that transition plan. We're currently working on some regional ag initiatives, including the local expansion of Fitch Branch Artisan Meats, and of course supporting new and existing industry. We previously had our small business grant program and launching the business plan competition back in 2023. So again, the immediate, I believe, priority when the committee was reorganized back in 2022 was the oversight of the small business grant program, which basically wrapped up in 2023. We then were tasked with putting together some marketing initiatives. Again, we hired Marketing Alliance to help design and launch the new economic development website, which is discovercraig.com. Again, just continuing through that process. So really, we're at a point now where our marketing is pretty much self-sufficient, obviously with the guidance of EDAC, but we're rolling through that pretty good. And again, just with the transition plan expiring next year, some of the more recent announcements with the tri-state settlements, we're just really trying to determine and try to get some guidance from council on what the next few years looks like for this committee. So again, we have a few priority items on our agenda that we want to work through, but Chris, as our board chair for the EDAC, do you have any comments or specific things you want to mention?
No, I think when we started talking about our strategic plan for 2025, the members, you know, it was tangible, intangible, you know, what can we accomplish that at the end of the year said, okay, we've done this, and then we reverted back to the word advisory committee. And so we wanted to make sure that that's still the role that the city sees us as an advisory committee, because as Shannon mentioned, the relationship we have with Marketing Alliance now, if the council is looking on us to be the marketing branch, then they can handle it directly. Marketing Alliance, they have enough familiarity with what our initiatives are and what we're trying to do. So when we talk about advisory, you know, the things that were on our radar were the tri-state settlement, the funds, how those would be managed, the recent announcement about Colorado maybe accelerating their transition to reclamation, and then the other things. We wanted to be more proactive, not reactive, meaning you come to us and say, hey, we did this, go out there and promote it. We'd rather be, here's the concerns we see with these different items, and give our comments back to the council, you know, in an advisory capacity. I think, you know, a good illustration is that in our last meeting, someone brought up with the acceleration of Colorado is, should the city of Craig and Moffett County write something to a senator on a national level about these Colorado employees not being taxed for early withdrawal of their 401k plans, if that's what they need to tap into to transition either to a new business or if they have to relocate, you know, trying to, yeah, whether or not that can happen, that's the kind of things we want to have discussions about. And I'll throw it out to the rest of the board members to see if I misstated, overstepped, or was way out in left field.
I think I'm here to listen to council, find out where direction you'd like us to go. I think Chris has said it, you know, directly. There are specific projects like the old courthouse site and that kind of thing. I think people in the community have said, what are you doing about that? And we'd like to know what our role is in those kinds of things.
So I guess with that, we can just work through the agenda. That's actually the first item on there is marketing of the former county courthouse site. So I know in earlier discussions, this committee or the EDAC was really tasked with that. I think there's been some things that have transpired since then with the county, obviously having some interested developers. And again, this might be more of a city-county kind of thing. So I know we've started back our joint services. I believe Luke and Derek are heading that up on behalf of the city, and Chris, the mayor as well. But is that something that you guys feel that we should continue to be involved with EDAC? Should that be added to are those conversations being had right now in those joint meetings, or?
It was always under my impression that we were going to task EDAC with that. However, it got halted for a few weeks because the county thought that they may have had a
Right.
developer. And then last I heard, that beginning of October, they were gonna let everyone know what that plan was. And I have not heard anything in the joint meeting. We have not been told. I don't know if you have heard anything or not.
Yes.
But I guess my impression was if that was to fall through, then I was hoping that the city and EDAC could jump on that, just from my opinion.
And so we did, at the last EDAC meeting, we did get an update from Neil over at the county. So this was as of October 28th. So he said he had recently had a site visit with a developer, along with Marlon, who's our building official, and the commissioners. Says he was excited about the property. When he left, he was planning on putting together a proposal. And he said, I spoke with him last Tuesday, which would have been a few weeks ago, a couple weeks ago. And he's working through some due diligence on his side. So he says, along with that developer, I had a conversation with another gentleman last Thursday, again, a couple weeks ago, that is interested in coming for a site visit. So it sounds like the county is still working through their prospects, but, and again, I think you're right, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the committee, so feel free to speak up, but I believe it was our intent to take that over in case those developers fell through at the county level.
And it's my personal opinion, I think the county should be reaching out to you and this committee.
Right.
Even if they do have developers lined up, and maybe hand that off, that's kind of what's has me a little worried, that they're trying to maybe tackle it. So I guess maybe that could be a topic at our next joint service meeting with Tony is, hey, this is a team effort.
Right.
Let us get involved and help, maybe not take full reins, but if that's okay with the committee, that's, we have the department, we have the tools, we have the advisory board. We need to be utilizing it, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I think when this was first presented, the city would take up over ownership of the property and then be responsible for marketing. I think, talking to staff and Peter, why would we necessarily have to take over ownership and be responsible for maintenance and any activities, whatever happens on the property? So at this point, I think it should be a joint venture with the county and following their leads, and EDAC even coming up with some leads and doing your site visits and just see where it all falls out. I guess the first one to the table with an offer, could win it. So, proceed with their project. So, coming up with a developer, it seems that they do a lot of legwork, but it doesn't always come to fruition. Yeah. So multiple contacts. So that's my opinion on it. So council, or from the council's perspective.
Well, and I agree, I don't think we need to own it. My concern is if we're gonna market it, we need to be doing it, and EDAC needs to be doing it instead of just sitting and waiting for the county. I
Right.
really don't want to wait till like joint services or to other times and say, well, we might have more, we might not.
Right.
I agree with you guys that we need, having more people interested is better than having one or maybe two. And
And
I'm
it
not
falls
sure
through.
how long do we wait for the county to come back and say, well, yeah, with those didn't work out, so you guys move forward.
I think
Can
from the.
Can I ask for you to dive a little deeper into what role you envision an advisory council doing with regard to marketing a site? I mean, if it's just market it, we've said that. If it's go with Marketing Alliance and market it, we've said that. What more would, I'm wondering, what does the advisory council in that role, what do you see us, what do you need from us?
I think I would see it as we coordinate the effort, not just marketing, but, that would be a usability study, not a feasibility, but something you can entice a developer with, saying, hey, this property's perfect for a multi-use building, or even, if there's multiple developers, then discussing, do we offer any type of incentive or something? Because if the county's not working with, if they're just hoping, and then the city's just kind of hovering until the county decides, and we're just sitting there, that's why I think if we have something marketable, this would be a great spot for this. And this is what the metrics say, And that's where maybe you partner with other organizations, you know, use some of the capital the LMD has to help with that as well. You know, I think it's a county property in the city. All of us have to have our hands together to figure out what.
Johnny, do we have any more Brownsfield grant money to come up with a redevelopment?
So if we get awarded this next grant that we actually just submitted today, there will be development dollars within that.
Okay, we don't have from the previous any money
No.
left.
No.
Okay.
But we won't know on that until probably May of next year.
Do we know what the developer is being given from the county as far as incentives, land costs, utilities, anything? Is there nothing? So it's a zero. How much is the property for sale? Those details are what frustrates me, is that you can't even get started with, you know, I have some people at OEDIT that want to know about the property. I stopped and showed it to them 2 years ago, said this is going to be an opportunity. How can you, I mean, it's like, I'd like to sell you a car, but I can't tell you whether it has air conditioning or tires or, you know, what are we selling? And I think that's really the answers. And I think the community's a little frustrated with, okay, it's cleaned up, it's gone. How come you guys didn't already have something planned for this? I mean, I think that's the, you know, we seem to be treading and not going anywhere. So, need the details. Is it for sale for $250,000? Is it free? What is it? Is it a $5 million property? I don't know what it is.
Well, I think part of the process is get proposals, you know, put out an RFP for developers and saying, you know, we have this piece of property, we're interested in proposals. What you could see and come back to us with what you need as well. I think the city's approach has been, with all these developers, we're willing to talk. You know, tell us what you need, and we'll tell you if we can do it so far. You know, so we've been pretty open with that, right, Peter? And all these negotiations, I sat through a Zoom call, 2 weeks ago now, with the developer, with Marlon and Peter, and outlined what exactly they want, not on this property, but another property in town, and what's needed to happen. So that's kind of where we're at. So, you know, is it good for housing? I agree with Chris there. What could it be? It could be almost anything. It could be retail. It could be, you know, housing. It could be, you know, smaller scale. But
Well, back to the details that Tom's requesting, you know, I think we've requested a little of that as well, and we haven't got any. And I think the only way we get the details is if we come up with the details.
Right.
You know, I don't see them doing that, and I don't know if that entails us taking over the property. You know, right now, to me, I kind of have a feel that it's a secret. They haven't been too overly open with you, and maybe that's a discussion that we have sooner than later with the commissioners, is say, what's going on here? What do you need from us? Because I agree, we have been sitting in the back burner. So either we need to take charge of it and come up with those details and lead it.
Right.
And so I guess that would be the next step, correct? Like, you know, if we want to budget money for a usability study or feasibility study, we need to be in control more than we currently are.
Can we do that without owning the property? Because I still don't want to own the property.
Well,
I think that's what
I think
it is.
we have to have a conversation with the commissioners before we start saying they're hiding anything. I mean, we haven't even broached that subject.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's
At
been
joint
my point,
services,
but
we
they've
haven't talked at all about it.
Yeah, so if they haven't, you know, Neil's been at the EDAC meetings and stuff, and they haven't said a whole lot, whether it's for sale or whether, you know, so.
Did they
It's just
give you
those
a-
details of,
a date yet that they're waiting to hear back from their developer?
He did not provide a specific date, no.
December 1st is
Is that what you told me?
Yeah.
Derek, when is y'all's next joint services meeting?
It's the third Monday,
fourth
or fourth Monday. So,
So not next Monday, but the following.
Okay.
Which would be.
I've heard they have a pretty well-heeled investor potential. And they're looking at a live-work approach to development that accommodates the property based on what the utilities are situated. That's all I've heard. I don't know who it is, but it's somebody that they met in Carbondale and had it seems to be somebody that's financially stable. I would also think that, I'm not sure how they're using the property, but I think they'd use it as leverage to attract a developer more so than trying to make a profit on it. I mean, in our previous conversations, they wanted to get it back on the tax rolls.
Right.
And that was their main objective, but I think to Chris's point, usability is important, especially for that location. You don't want a rendering plan across the street from the bank. Yeah.
He wants traffic generator.
Prefer a casino or something.
When we go back to this idea of overarching strategy, something council might want to consider is that this is an example of a site that is ready and needs to be redeveloped. It's a hole, literal, in our community. There are others. Should in our going forward from 2025 in the Keystone Strategic Plan, should we create a strategy around development, site, promotion, site readiness? That's what Chris is talking about in terms of usability studies, the site readiness process, and have that done strategically, not just for this property, but for multiple properties out there that are currently or could become available as we go through these changes in our community. And so, that's what I would call it, because then as an advisor, I can advise you. We can talk and pull state incentives, and we can pull the Economic Development Council of Colorado's study on incentives, and we can take deep dives, and we can feed up to you information about best practices. If it's one site that you want marketed, I'm not a marketer. I don't know what else to advise you on other than, yes, go forward as quickly as the deal allows you. Don't go so far forward so fast and aggressively, we break the deal. But if the deal isn't there from the county side, then absolutely go forward. But I don't know what, a strategy where we do site development for multiple city sites, that's something I think I would recommend that council consider having EDAC maybe get a grip around.
Well, I think, I can't see the city expending funds to come up with this study till we get a definite answer from the county.
Correct.
So from that standpoint, I think we're out till December 1st or later, if that's their deadline. Maybe we call them and get talk to Tony and say, what's your actual drop dead date on this? Because we're gonna spend this money, then the county comes back, oh, by the way, we have a developer. So, we have done some of that in downtown. We used that original Brownsfield grant money. We did redevelopment of the Cabby property, some properties downtown, as well as the south end of Yampa, for potential, what it would look like. So we have that information available. We just haven't done this piece of property here yet. So I think we need an answer from the county before we expend.
Well, you know how the development process goes. It's kind of a slow process, and if this guy comes up with nice concepts and serious, he seems serious, his intent is to move forward with the project, then December 1st could come and go. And as long as they have, somebody that they think is reasonably credible.
Right. So we don't have an answer, I see, on that yet, until we follow the county's lead on that. They're the owner stuff.
I think we can
We'll
have
have
a
the
discussion
Yeah,
in
thank
2
you.
weeks and let them know whatever assistance Shannon's department and the advisory council can be, sounds like everyone's more than willing to step up, you know, and if they do have an investor, then how can we assist in landing them? So we'll make that top of the agenda.
I think we just need to, there's a sense of urgency, I think, as a community to get that developed.
Yep.
So
I
hopefully
agree.
the county sees that.
So I believe our next EDAC meeting is on December 9th. So hopefully by that meeting, we can have answers from the county and kind of where we stand.
Remind them that they're a year behind from their original promise. Yeah.
Okay. So the next item is the tri-state settlement structure, and I know that there's a couple of items on the council agenda tonight to discuss some of the logistics behind that as far as legal counsel and things like that. I think the EDAC was more wondering how we could be a support to set potentially the parameters of how that money is distributed and spent. And again, it looks like there's still a lot of things that need to be worked through before that even gets to that point. And again, we understand that it's a city-county thing. Chris, did you want to elaborate any more on that?
I think our intent was, you know, the council, you know, you're on various boards, you're stretched thin. We have a group that if we can do some legwork and say, hey, this is some ideas of what you know, we're not going to be legal advisors, but how this might look and the pitfalls or non-pitfalls of that. We were just offering our board as a collective think tank to run with a process to take something off the council's plate.
Well, Tri-State Fund is written in their settlement agreement, they will donate this money or give this money to the community. The community is defined as, in their agreement, the city of Craig, Moffett County, for an economic development fund. Okay, that's the only structure we have at this point. We have some philosophical views on the negotiating committee and what was discussed with OJT and Tri-State, and that we would use this money and try to make it a perpetual fund, meaning we're going to try to not spend the principal. If we do spend principal, then it'll be reimbursed as a loan or something of that nature, where we're trying to work within that dollar amount, whatever that generates, that amount of money. The work we have done so far with Heather and the county attorney is how we can invest this money and what type of investments, is it public money, or can we use this money a little bit more aggressively? So we've had a lot of discussions. We really need to get on this, at the first of the year and come up with the fund. So the process in my mind is we're going to hire, and we have some leads on who to work with, some law firms to set up the bylaws and the structure of this fund, a legal operating fund. There will be a board of directors from this fund, made up of city and county and representatives. We haven't decided yet if it's going to be a 5-member board or a 7-member board. Personally, I like the 7-member board, but just so we have more representation from the business community. I like having a lawyer on there, a banker. This is my opinion. A banker, a lawyer, and somebody in real estate, just so we have that extra expertise on the board. And there would be city and the county representation. It's going to be set up that either the city, in my mind, if it goes through, either the city or the county cannot have dominance over this fund. Okay? So come a tough budget year and there's $10 million sitting in, there, the county goes, oh, I need that to balance our budget. So hopefully the city and the county, and the city can do the same thing as well. Not use that money, they cannot touch that money for that purpose. So that's why we need some legal representation specializing in this field, how to set this up. So that's kind of where we're at on the fund. What complicates this a little bit more, Shannon mentioned, we did file intervenor status in the Excel ERP that was filed. We hired the same, well, tonight we're gonna vote on at the council meeting to hire the same legal firm and split it with the county to ask Excel, because they own 21%, I think, of Craig Station, I forget the exact, Craig Station, for some type of settlement with them as well as part of their ERP with PUC. PUC actually has a little bit more teeth with Excel than they did with Tri-State, because you know, Excel is basically a Colorado utility and is under the PUC. So we can make more money, but the hope is we'll have more money to add to this fund. So by 29, we will have $22 million in that fund, depending how it's invested and what kind of rates of rate of return and you know what we get. If we have to invest it in C-Safe, you know, where the city and the county have our investments. Right now, what are we getting? 2%? Is it 5 right now? Okay. So, and so depending what kind of investments. So we try to work, that's the intent at this point. I'm gonna fight real hard that we stick to that, because that's what we negotiated from the whole process. It took us a year to get to that point with Tri-State, and OJT was in the room, and public PUC, and the public utilities consumer affairs group were all part of this negotiation. So hopefully, when a developer comes in, we'll have $1.5 million, $2 million a year we can work with out of that fund.
Do we know, and I know during the negotiation process, you know, the two biggest priorities I think for the city and the county was to utilize the fund for job creation and property tax, or not property taxes, but
Thank you,
tobacco
Shannon.
taxes.
That was the criteria for granting and using this money is for creating jobs or adding property tax.
So
Chris, you got a look on your face there.
Well, I just, you know, if it's gonna be money given to two public entities, if the public fund, you know, if it has to be insured, much as like the city and the county fund, now it severely limits what can be invested in. Even if it, I don't think you're gonna get 10%.
Oh, no, we're
So
not getting
when you
10.
say 1 to 2 million, you might be getting 3% here in the next year. Because C-Safe, you know, they kind of mirror.
Well, every year it increases depending on what Tri-State's reinvestment in Moffett County. So they have backstop payments, sorry, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
Backstops payments on what they would have paid every year for the first 7 years after that, and then it declines every year. So potentially, if they do not build the gas plant in Moffett County, we'll have $50 million in this fund.
Right.
So, potentially, if they don't go bankrupt beforehand. They just got $2.5 billion in grants and loans, you know, guarantees, so I don't see that happening. So that's
once
where we're at.
Once we distinguish whether it's public or private, that's kind of our next step. How can we utilize this committee?
I think the committee can come with proposals, and, you know, it's the same as the school board, you know, any taxing entity or any group can come with a proposal, but I think we will judge them on what it does, jobs and property tax.
So as far as actually, and again, it sounds like a lot of this is obviously gonna be determined through the legality process, but as far as helping potentially set up or monitor, I guess, how the funds are spent for job creation, like what those parameters look like, and same for property tax, do do you see this committee needing to provide input into that? Is that gonna be more council commissioners? I mean, I think that's kind of what we're looking.
we're gonna need advice on the structure and representatives from, if we do, they're proposing 3 city council, 3 county commissioners, 3 and 3, and 4 other, if we go 7. So, no, it was a 2 and 2 and 1 that they wanted. And then I'm proposing we do 2 and 2 and representatives from the other groups as well to get to 7. So, sure, we'll come for advice on the structure. I'm sure we'll have workshops and work groups trying to set this whole committee up, feedback on the structure. So I'd like to see EDAC be at the table, maybe even have a representative on the board. So.
I guess timing wise, do we know?
We get our first check in 26, first quarter of 26, so we got a lot of work to do in a year, Heather.
She already gave us her advice.
I have an update later.
$5.5 million, so that's our first check. And hopefully Excel will be contributing some as well. It's nowhere near the size of settlement at Tri-State. We might get a couple million, something of that nature, So does that answer your question? So more to come. I hate to say that, the second one, more to come tonight.
That's all right. Thank you for the hard work on that.
Alright, so moving down the agenda, this was something that was brought up at the last EDAC meeting. We have a gentleman that serves on our committee, he's not here tonight, but his wife actually works at Colorado, and he brought this to our attention at our meeting a couple weeks ago. And Chris, I may lean on you to explain this a little bit better, because I understand it, but just from your financial perspective. But he had some questions about some of the penalties, I guess, that the workers are getting hit with as they retire and kind of and leave. But do you mind explaining that a little more?
Yeah, I think the 2 big concerns are the early withdrawal penalty of 10%, and then most likely it'll jump their income tax into the next bracket. So, it seems like these employees that have worked a long time want to capture some of that to try to move on with their life, but now they're getting penalized. And whether or not the IRS would have an ear to a national voice, Hickenlooper or Bennett, who knows, but we just thought it was a good idea to raise, and as a community, just let them know that these are the little things you could do, because the IRS changes its form every year, and I don't know if there's enough, I think, coal impacted employees nationwide where it's worth at least just shooting a shot across the bow to see if anyone asks.
I don't know if that might be another item to bring up with the county as well. Again, I think our intent from this committee is to see if it would be worthwhile to put together a joint letter to whomever, like Chris said, whether that be, our senators or state reps, to see if there's anything that we can do about that. And I think from an economic development perspective, the way it was presented to us is I think a lot of these folks, not all, but some, would like to take some of that retirement money and maybe reinvest into opening a business. And so if that's prohibiting them from doing so, maybe we can try to help do something about that. And Peter and I had a short conversation before this. I know there's some language in the settlement, and I don't know if Chris or Peter, you guys want to talk to that about.
We get our first update in January from Tri-State. We scheduled a meeting where they're supposed to meet with us twice a year. Representative from Tri-State to give us updates on, number one, their workforce transition plan. Of course, for Colorado, that's going to be a little too late because they're going to be transitioning by then, other than reclamation crew. And so I see that coming, but again, twice a year. And then resources or their assets, kind of updates what they see coming forward. So that's written in their agreement. You know, our settlement offer had nothing to do with workforce transition. Tri-State said they were handling that with OJT. And so I think we can definitely get a hold of our state representative, Dylan Roberts, and he's been very supportive of everything we can do. We can kind of see, and then talk to our two federal legislators from the city standpoint. I don't know, what's OJT? Anybody heard what OJT's been doing? They've been working on workforce transition.
I think it would be great to have that conversation with the OJT. I could tell you, I think the National Association of Counties Building Resilient Economies in Coal Communities would be a great vehicle for focusing on, you know, multiple coal communities, elevating this issue and bringing it. I think that there might be more interest from the IRS and others towards this solution. And I say that because when I had a conversation with the IRS and others on massive tax incentives to drive new business into our communities, our coal impacted communities, they were having a struggle. Like, we need your help to know what would be beneficial, because we feel like there's disconnects on getting the money to. We talked about a couple of things, including the census zone maps not working well in some of these efforts as a basis for determining where eligibility exists and isn't. We talked about right sizing. The lowest investment that they had made to that point was $1 million, and I could imagine the freak out on faces of small business owners. Oh, but you have to write for $1 million. And that's a big chunk of change to gulp at. So there's some things I think that they are genuinely looking for feedback. How that might change in the next 6, 12 months, 4 years, I don't know. The taxing code, and I think we can expect some major changes.
So.
Yeah.
Is this something you want to talk on joint services? You know, the county and the city drafting this letter and asking for?
Yeah, I think in the letter too, maybe include reference to the SBA, the Small Business Administration, if they can put some loan programs together to help. Because I don't think any of these employees are looking for a handout, they're just looking for help with the obstacles from startup to capital. And
the haircut, when you capital gains or your retirement account, that haircut's a sizable, sizable chunk. Yeah. So, we'll put that on the agenda and see where we go. And who's got a OJT contact that we can? Jennifer Peroni, or isn't that her?
Yes, and she was actually at the last EDAC meeting, and she did give an update on what they're working on out there. So.
Are you kind of proposing EDAC take the lead on that and draft that letter?
I think we could. I mean, if that's something.
I think that's a
but we need to move it up a little higher too.
Right.
Right.
So.
No, I agree, but if we go to the joint service agreement, we're gonna speak with Tony about it, and then we're gonna say, okay, who's gonna do it?
Yeah.
So,
No, that's
maybe
good.
we offer this, they've offered it, and do you support it?
it'll be your chat box, you can just print out your letter.
Okay?
Make sure.
No, good point. I always like the, who's gonna do what when we have these
She
meetings.
sets me up for disasters.
I'm speaking with Wade Buchanan on Thursday morning. Would you like me to suggest, that an update to EDAC and City Council might be timely, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think to the workers in general, would be happy to know, what's happening.
Would you like me to also pull in the strings of the national partners like NACO and others to see if there's willingness with the IRS?
I think there's better chances in numbers than city and the county going this alone. So. Thank you.
So next item is the Craig Business and Industrial Park. So speaking of OJT, we did finally receive notification a couple of months ago. We had put in 2 grant applications to them for the acquisition of property for a piece of property that we had identified for the potential location of the industrial park. So both of those grants totaled $1,051,000. Again, finally got notification that we did get the full award for that. We've been working on that for a couple of years. So Peter and I had basically asked OJT if we could get that money up front, obviously to pay for the land. They have been working with the state to see if that's something that they can allow, because typically they don't. It's usually a reimbursable process. Obviously, this situation's a little bit different. In any case, we got notification end of October that they would only allow about 50% of that, well, only 50% of that up front. So it'd be a partial payment of the $1,051,000 up front that we could utilize to purchase the property. And then we'd have to, they'd pay the remaining 50% when we close. Currently, the property is listed at $1.4 million. We have in our budget, and I added this after I'd sent the packets out Friday, so I know EDAC and council have all seen this, but on the very last page of your packet, we do have a line item for the industrial park acquisition. So we've got $1,331,000 in there, so we're still gonna have a deficit of about 70,000-ish to come up with. We have been working with a private developer on this. I talked to them last week and they have given me permission to announce who that is. Some of you may already know, but it is Colorado Outdoors. We're actually working with them on another housing development. They have actually agreed if we would permit them to be the prime master developer, that they would pay that difference as basically a placeholder to say, hey, we want to be the master developer, we'll pay the difference of what the asking price is and the deficit. So that was good news, but I think a lot of things have transpired since we've gotten the final grant award. We do have some businesses that are interested in locating there, but now with this passenger rail coming through, some of their priorities may have changed. That's obviously another item on our agenda, but we wanted to talk again more about what that looks like. There have been some discussion as well at looking at potential other locations. So I just wanted to talk that through with everybody, get your thoughts on that, and obviously we'll talk a little bit more about the passenger rail and kind of what those priorities are as well, but that's another potential location for some items there. So anything that I missed on
No, I think
that?
because the process was so drawn out and over 2 years, maybe for the newer council and councilwomen, what the rationale on that location is and what the forecasted use would be, just because there's new faces. I mean, I don't want to speak on council's behalf, so. But, okay.
No, definitely, I'd like to know why, what the plan is exactly. We've never had a workshop or anything about it, so.
Right. Right, and again, without getting into too much detail of what the developer has told us, there's kind of gonna be a twofold approach. And for those of you that aren't familiar, so it's the 25 acres roughly that's across from the safety center on First Street. And again, the reason that was the prime locale is because of the accessibility to the rail. Again, we do have other locations that could potentially have access to the rail as well, but we can talk through those too. Their plan is to basically build what they call a flex space. So it's about 100,000 square foot just building that you can subdivide however you want. So that would take up half of the site, and then on the other side would basically just be outfitting with the infrastructure just for land. So a person could come in there and purchase land and build, and then reserving the back part that's adjacent to that rail for any type of rail opportunity. Now again, this could change. This is not set in stone. In addition to the money that we've secured to purchase the land, we also have $2.5 million that we got from congressionally directed spending grant money for some of the public infrastructure. That's obviously not going to cover all of it, but that's a start. So.
And the city would retain ownership of the property?
Peter, what have we?
Well, I think the master,
Yeah, I mean, what's,
Yeah.
what do you,
Well, do
what does the
you-
developer do?
I think the
besides-
master planner's approach would be to lease and or sell segments of the property to cover the overhead for the development. So it's pretty preliminary at this point.
Very
I
much,
mean,
yes.
We're looking at similar development that was established in the Montrose area that seems to be very successful. So to your point, we'd have to, we need to have some more discussion on it.
Brandy, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the passenger rail and the depot concept, and then, I mean, we can get into this more, but
Yeah, a lot of it, and from the last stakeholder meeting that they had in Hayden, is it seems from the CDOT viewpoint, and CDOT again is just a contractor with UP, because UP still controls all the lines and will continue to control all the lines, is they're looking at having definitely by the early 2026 passenger rail extended to Bond, and that's their big push. Then the second, what they almost call a commuter rail, because if you do it commuter versus Craig to Denver, you don't have to do as long a platform. And so basically from Oak Creek to Craig would be the next phase. And again, it's still up to the cities. They haven't announced who they would put depots at. I'm sure we're gonna do something in Craig. It's just a question of, we as a city need to decide where we want that. Do we want that in the downtown and develop things off of that? And it's basically through 2030, they're looking at trying to develop that line between Oak Creek and Craig, because from Oak Creek to Bond, it's a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of hard rail lines to make it passenger accessible. So that, at this point, that last phase that they were originally thinking would be 32, 33, they're not even throwing out a date, just because of, as they do more looking at it, that last section is expensive. So for freight, it's not gonna really affect it. You don't need the improvements on the lines for freight that you do for passenger. So freight will continue for as long as UP wants it to continue. But if they can push and get the passenger part of it, the commuter between Craig, basically between Craig and Steamboat. I mean, yeah, it'll move down to Oak Creek as well, but it's more, what they're pushing on is a Craig to Steamboat line, because that'll be easier to connect and cheaper. And if you do it as a commuter instead of a passenger rail, long-term, whatever, I don't know the term they used, you can do different things.
so I think for the industrial park perspective, just maybe keeping that in mind, that could kind of be the end of the line. We talked
Right.
about potential maintenance
Maintenance facilities and other type things would be over possibly industrial area with a depot downtown, and then it goes to that, wherever that is, whether it's where we're currently looking at another site, that would be the end of the freight and where you develop. And that could be a part of that industrial park, is developing the maintenance shops and other type things tied in that you'd need for passenger.
That's really what they're looking for, right? Refueling, maintenance?
Refueling, maintenance, right.
Because they have to
But
do
also-
something to get that train.
But you also have employees, you also have conductors and other things that they have to have, that you need a base for all of that. Whether it's a commuter, or whether it's all the way connected to Denver, you still need that base.
So what CDOT, only thing they would do is build the platform
Right.
and a warming pad.
Yep,
Any redevelopment of that area is at developer's cost. So, whatever we would envision that area to be, in your packet, this was part of the Brownfield grant, we didn't even think about passenger rail or commuter rail at that time, but this was just a conceptual drawing of what that area could look like. So,
And, yeah, so this is another item that I added to the packet today. It's the second to last, or first to last page. This is the concept that, as Chris said, was put together through the Brownfields grant, our previous one, and this is for the South Yampa area. Again, just a concept. But the good news is, what we've been told is just even having this concept and anticipating this coming through is kind of puts us a little bit more ahead of maybe placing these things in Hayden or down the line. But, and again, this is subject to change, but this would be more so for the passenger component.
And with that passenger, the RTA, you're still looking for, if you want to do circulator line, if you want to do to the airport, to increase the amount to Steamboat, again, you want to tie them in the same place, wherever, however that works. You take that design and you're tying them together.
Do they know, would UP be the operator, or would there be another company that would?
CDOT would be the operator
Of the trains?
of the trains, of the passenger trains, at this point.
Right.
Now, that could change, but as of this point, that's what CDOT is thinking, that they would be like the Amtrak to make it run.
Just thinking in terms of who to partner with regarding the maintenance piece of that.
That'd be a
That's
UP.
A UP thing.
That'd be a UP thing.
So the UP would maintain the trains?
Maintain the lines, and I assume the trains? That hasn't been talked about. The UT is would be building and making it ready for passenger rail, even if CDOT is thinking UP would be controlling all of that.
So developer might work with UP to create the maintenance,
Right,
potentially.
potentially, right.
Shannon, you mentioned in combination with the business industrial park and the passenger rail conversation are kind of intermingled, which makes really good sense, that there might be other sites along the rail that would facilitate business industrial park as well. I don't really want you to go into details of those, but I am kind of curious, pros and cons, and specifically, the property at question right now, do you have a valuation? Is it worth the 1.4, or you're going to have difficulty with OJT and other grant funders if the property valuation is much lower than the sale price? Is that going to create issues with the grant funding?
I don't think so. Peter, do you want to talk through the process that the city has to go through? Like we had to get the commercial valuation, like if the city gets involved and has to put up any funding, there's certain things that we have to go through, which we've already gotten the appraisal on that property. Is there any other?
Well, so far, the grants, the funders haven't been dissuaded from
Okay.
the property valuation.
I know my lender, if I bring a property in that's
It'd be-
twice, three
it'd be
times
tough-
the.
It'd be tough to get a
Yeah.
comp
Yeah. Yeah.
on what we're doing on that property, I think, at this point. And just Shannon, it would be fair to say that for the industrial park and for the depot district, I mean, this doesn't happen without public-private partnerships, wouldn't you say?
Oh, completely, yeah.
I mean, otherwise, we don't have the juice to make that happen. We can bring certain aspects of the project, like infrastructure, through the 2.5 million CDS grant to the property with design, all that paid for through grant funding, but well, we have to have those private developers involved.
Peter, what kind of, I mean, those are incentives enough, but what kind of teeth do you create in that private-public agreement that makes sure that the developer delivers on their side and doesn't just take the juice and run? Not to say that they would at all. I believe in what this developer is doing, but I just, I'm thinking of other stories of transition communities that were not so great and had developers that didn't last the test of time.
Well, we have a really good real estate attorney.
Okay.
Yes, and I wouldn't hazard to say exactly what we would put into an agreement, but he's very conscientious when it comes to protecting our interests. So, obviously, deed restrictions, that sort of thing, and, in certain cases, but yeah, we just have to use some wisdom, make sure that we don't step into a trap someplace. Yeah. And to do that, we have to have expertise. It gets pretty complicated sometimes.
So I think from an EDAC perspective, what type of guidance would we be looking for from council on this site? Is this the site? Do we have any other ideas? I mean, again, very preliminary. I agree that there's gonna have to be bigger, more detailed conversations about this. Anything specific that you?
No, the EDAC, we don't have any authority to enter into any agreement, so we can review and advise our comments on the developer plans and the teeth of any agreement with the developer. Due diligence of the developer, and just to make sure that there's a lot of people with a lot of contacts, so you might find a different story on any developer, so I think that's what EDAC can do.
What would be helpful for council to have from EDAC on this?
Well, we need some.
Well, I think
Yeah.
the council needs an update on where we're at on this entire project first before.
Yeah, fair,
You know.
fair.
I think that's probably
We don't know,
what you
we
just
don't know a
got.
whole lot,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think it would be worthwhile for us to get up to speed so we can update.
And we talked about a workshop a little bit further on about where we're at on all these projects, and maybe try to do that. We got so many items we haven't gotten to in workshops, so. But anyway, I think from an EDAC to council, you guys need to come to us with some project you would like to see done, or you're looking for funds, or something that, I guess, some direction for council, what you would like council to do. From a funding perspective, we just went through our budget, so it's gonna be hard for us to come up with some study money or something that we're not gonna apply for grants or something to come up with that funding, but is there a particular project you wanna be working on that you need, I don't know, support with or funding for?
Well, I think EDAC needs to step up, and I guess we're looking for authorization from council to do exactly that. Do you want advice on things like the event center that the commissioners are working on? How does that affect the city? What's our recommendations after seeing the master plan that comes out? Should we be aggressive about taking on something like that and presenting something to you or not? I think we're looking for our place. And, overstepping would not be something we're interested in doing, but we want to advise you on the things that you want advice on.
At the moment, we don't bring projects, we don't do projects. We're an
Well-
advisory group, so
Well,
we get in this push-pull.
Right, but you come
Yeah.
up with the project, you can come up with ideas and you advise,
Right.
this is
where
we
you
feel
should
council
spend
should
your-
move towards.
Yeah.
Versus
Right.
on this project versus another. Whether this is where the depot district needs to be or it doesn't. This is
Right.
where the industrial park needs to be or it doesn't. That's more what I'm looking for from me to.
Should we be concentrating more on housing some, or what, so.
So I guess with that said, this is kind of the last item on our agenda, I mean, do we need to start working on another strategic plan, or we talked about a comprehensive plan? I mean, I think the transition plan did us well, it guided us, and we've accomplished a lot of the priorities on there. And we can continue, I think, some of those, but I guess bigger picture, is this something that we need to look into the future towards, now considering and knowing that we're gonna have this money coming in, and hopefully some ideas of how that money can be spent, just thinking out loud.
The city's overdue for a comprehensive plan. It's and that's not a small undertaking. That's a $200,000 or $300,000 commitment to complete, but it covers, policies, zoning, regulations, annexations, those kinds of things. So you kind of have a direction where development should take place within the community, but it also gets into things like recreation, tourism, transportation. It covers land use, economic development. Each of these pieces falls within that plan, and we have pieces of those that we can add to it. And we have the housing needs assessment, those kinds of things, which frankly the housing needs assessment is almost
Outdated.
due to be redone. I mean, but the comprehensive plan theoretically should be completed every 10 years for a community. The last comprehensive plan the city of Craig had was like 2002, and so it's something that probably by 26 we should be looking to budget that particular plan, but it requires a lot of requires somebody like Shannon to help steer the project and develop steering committees to be essential in every aspect of that plan in terms of growth and development.
So that's kind of initially what you're asking us. Do you want to get started on that?
Right. Which it sounds like we need to.
Well, I think 2026 budget,
Yeah.
Peter would bring that to council with part of the budget, so.
Somebody would.
Considering
Yeah, you would.
considering the investment, between 26 and 30, a lot can happen in this community.
Mhm.
And if you're basing a study on 26 and things don't progress as we hope, or something else changes, I almost wondered, do we find a Band-Aid study that we can limp along with until the dust clears? Because the money that you're receiving, but then the tax dollar decrease, the services, you want to wait until that settles before you invest $300,000 on a study, or wait 3 years and then invest that money, and then in the interim, try to figure out what was on the 25 transition plan. We know what's going on now, but how can we plug the holes in the dam until it stabilizes?
Because that Vision 25 plan needs to be updated. That's not going to be a huge cost, but it is an effort that has to happen. And that can be plugged into the comprehensive plan or updated in 26 or 27.
Have we gone through this plan and rated it and see where we've done good and what we need to do, or?
The one thing I noticed on here, there was like a steering committee that needed to be appointed with a lead, and I don't think one has ever been fully developed, to my knowledge.
Well, I think that's kind of what the EDAC was with me but right, as far as a formal process, well.
As they define it here.
Right.
So that's where we should maybe refocus our efforts of becoming the more active champion.
Looking for a role.
Yeah, probably the best breakdown is on page 5, where it just shows the charts and like the top 4 priorities and how those are split out.
It's important to take things to completion, and I'm impressed with how many things you can check up. We can check off the list on this plan.
Maybe we look at the plan and the things that aren't checked off, we determine if it's something we want to continue or change. You see CNCC there, big question mark that we need to address.
Yeah, one thing I would like to see is if we're gonna stick with this plan and just maybe add to it, at least temporarily, is kind of drilling down, like especially on our outdoor rec, now that we have the water park so close to being ready to go, like what does that look like now? Who are we trying to recruit to bring in here as far as, you know, someone who rents out kayaks or paddle boards or you know, a food truck, or like what does that look like as far as developing that outdoor recreation now to expand on the work that's already been done?
So are we agreeing as council to basically hand the reins of this, have the EDAC be the steering committee on this and revise and help check off what isn't checked off? I think that's
And
what
the
the
direction we
for.
need to go, do we need to push on CNCC
Well,
or
I think you
CME or
evaluate
whatever
it
to
first,
do the outdoor rec?
and then.
What's
But that's what I'm
priority at
saying,
this
is we
point?
let them
5 years
evaluate
later?
it and present.
Sure, because that's, yeah.
So I think that can be a big discussion for us at our meeting in December, and then bringing kind of our recommendations to council in January, and then getting direction how to proceed with those.
Or whenever you can get to it,
Yeah.
and spend enough time to make sure, so.
Okay.
Holidays are busy coming up, and I don't know how much you can get together between now and then, so.
We're a highly compensated volunteer board. So
Yeah, I know, I'm on a few of those too, you know.
Well, and I'll also say, and I don't know if this is the group that takes that on, that could be a council decision, but, you know, under infrastructure and planning, we have housing there. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of conversation about housing as far as the multifamily projects, but I also have, you know, seen some renderings of CNCC looking at a housing development project, and I know, I had a meeting with Dr. Neal from the school district, and he's brand new to this district, and he's like, I need to build housing. Well, I don't think school districts need to build housing, so I think it would be really worthwhile to get those interested parties at a table together to say, truly, you know, what are your needs? I mean, maybe that's changed a little bit since the housing assessment study, and I don't, you know, remember exactly how much of that conversation they were involved in. But I think having a, you know, a real sit-down conversation with those groups and organizations, MRH, CNCC, the district, you know, because again, I don't think the school district wants to build housing, but I think they're at a point where they're like, if we want to bring people in here, we have to have it. Sure. So,
How much of that gets done at the Housing Authority and Cura Board conversations? Because I know EDAC, we've asked for reports and updates and kind of to cross-pollinate on those issue areas. I don't know, it's fuzzy to me, like what role EDAC plays versus Housing Authority versus Cura Board. So I'd want a little council clarity on, you know, sure if you want us to convene those groups, but it belongs more with Housing Authority, or is this your thing, maybe? Some
or could
clarity
those
with that, yeah.
recommendations come from your group, maybe,
Right.
and we,
Yeah.
I don't know what that needs to look like, but.
The housing authority is more the, I don't know, legal, legislative, creating some of the rules and the contracts, you know. You guys can bring us ideas on that and work with us under that, so. The housing authority has to sign off on some of these agreements, and am I summarizing that good enough, Heather, or?
And Cura would not have any bearing on that, yeah. Kind of stuff.
But as you guys bring stuff to us, I guess that's my summary, you know, what you would like to see. And, you know, Shannon's at your meetings come up, and maybe Shannon can bounce ideas off council, or more workshops like this as well. But I think a good place to start, I'm glad, is review this plan and update it.
Yeah, and I think it goes both ways. You know, I think we do have a lot going on as council and city, and I think we need to get them involved a little bit more, because I know they are. They're chomping at the bit, and they're asking for updates, and some updates we don't have. So it's like, okay, how can we get them up to speed so they can go do that?
Melanie, when's the Whitewater Park gonna open?
Hopefully we finish it up by the end of next year, but I'm not making any promises.
See, that's another project that, you know, city and the staff has done, and Melanie's done a ton of work to get this thing, but how do we promote it? How will we grow it? You know, you talk about food trucks, you know, how do we, I don't think we have a plan to grow that as a tourist issue.
Well, and part of that is, and that's looking for budget 2026, we need a way to get from the city to that area. I don't know if it's a path, I'm not sure if it's a road, I don't know, but there needs to be some way to bike and walk from Craig to the river. And we've talked about it for years, and yet never really moved forward with it. That's a huge portion. If we want to make that whitewater park usable, you need a way to get from the city to it.
Well, we're looking, that's on our list, right? We've talked about that for,
Talked about it forever.
yeah. But it's gonna be on the city and the
It's
county's
an
priority
updated
list.
priority for the
TBR.
state TBR. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
South Range Development. Yeah.
Since we're running up against the end, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on the agenda items. I think it's clear that the role of the EDAC is still advisory, but more aggressive advisory instead of passive aggressive advisory. The courthouse, we're waiting, but if we don't hear something from our next December meeting, don't be surprised if we put that on the agenda. Hey, we really would like to know what's going on. You know, we don't need to know if we just need to know it's in discussion. That's better than we got now. Tri-State, we're just gonna wait until bylaws and ideas have been created, and then we can read and offer our input. We will draft a letter for the early retirement penalties, maybe SBA, and then, you know, send it to the various channels. On the industrial park, I think EDAC is in a holding position till the council meets to get updated and decide what's the future look like for that project. The rail, I think everyone's waiting till CDOT releases their report in December just to know what's going on. And then on the 2025, we're gonna evaluate, update, and then identify the stakeholders that need to be part of the conversation. And then determine which areas we should hit and might be suited better for others. Fair assessment?
I think so.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good.
One thing, when we discussed the courthouse, we also discussed other, I think Shannon brought it up, other properties that could be, that would help get site readiness too. That would be something that I would look from this group and say, you know, we might, this lot over here, we could see could be
Right.
potential economic development, or we could get developers there. What does council need to do to get infrastructure there to make it development ready, type of thing too, you know, if there's sites out there that you guys see and know of and say, hey, well, how can we get infrastructure there? I think that's a role of the council as well.
Okay.
You know, a lot of these vacant properties are vacant for a reason. And a lot of that's infrastructure cost. So that's why they're sitting empty, so.
Yeah, and
And-
as of lately, there's been more
Right.
grants, so.
So
we
what
have
the
projects.
city's always been, we're working with a developer, they're showing interest. What do you need to get, you know, to make that deal happen? Do we need a water line, sewer line? And that's kind of what we've been doing with these developers, so.
In 2023, the Building Resilient Economies of Coal Communities, we did a region-wide policy scan to understand if there were policy barriers towards transition plan items. And we also created, distilled a regional transition plan, so had all of the pillars, but it was not necessarily localized. So some of the stuff would apply to us, some not. Would it be of interest for EDAC and or council to have that documentation to have a look at? There might be some policy fixes that you all could approach or take a closer look at if there's barriers towards incentivizing development, for example. I don't honestly remember. There was a lot of policy when you think of the 3 counties and all of the governments within all 3 counties. So it may or may not be that useful, but certainly something perhaps we could, as an EDAC, take a close look at and then filter up again in this evaluation of the 2025 plan.
Sure.
What we're seeing, and then of course I like your idea of identifying other sites, but would think that next step after evaluating this transition plan and helping to develop and make economic development recommendations towards a new transition plan, we could perhaps have a strategy around that. To Mayor's point, some properties, you know, may be blighted, et cetera, but what would it take, and is there a strategy around where do you start first? What,
Right.
you know, and how do you know, and, you know, what does that look like? There could be a strategy that you create around that we could help to execute on the 2025 plan.
I think if you're aware of any particular ordinances or zoning regs that, first of all, we have to have zoning, we have to have design standards, you know, we have to have planned growth. But there's things in particular you're hearing, you know, we need to hear that as well. Because a lot of them are unfounded that you're hearing out in the community. Sonic, bowling alley, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of them out there that we've chased away development that's not the case, so. They've been approved, you know, some of them.
Will you send that to me and,
Yeah,
we
you
can,
actually have access, so does Peter, Mayor, a number of people at the table have had access. from the
Theirs
beginning. But
is-
I think it's worth bringing a copy and actually digging into
Mhm.
it. Just because you had access doesn't mean you had a sense of what that was and what value it might bring to the city.
Peter, have you, what AIR's been doing to review some of our ordinances
Yeah, those have primarily been the
Housing.
affordable housing strategies, yeah.
Right.
I'll also get a hold of the methodology that they used. It wasn't public review, it was more, you've set in motion, these are the sectors and types of community infrastructure improvements you feel are necessary for this transition to happen effectively. Are there any policies that can provide barriers to that? And maybe, you know, I'm just making this one up, but let's say, you know, childcare, we know that's a perennial issue in terms of community side development, limiting ability for folks to enter the workforce, maybe start a business, whatever. Is there, you know, a city ordinance that prohibits childcare facilities in blah-de-blah places? Maybe that's something you review and consider and could change. Don't know but that scan was created for us so that we can take a look at.
Could be
Any
interesting.
of those, yeah.
Could be.
I'll dust that off and take a look.
So you got a couple things on your to-do list, don't bite off more.
Right. But we're such a well-paid volunteer group.
And we appreciate you. Chris, you got anything else, or?
Out of words.
Shannon? No? Peter? Council? EDAC? Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.